Hello all, Rick here once more, asking a question: why a Prime Directive? On an overall level, General Order 1 prevents a starship, including all its crew, from interfering with another culture, power, or government if they are external to the Federation, especially in the case of pre-warp civilizations that may be unaware of the greater galactic communities. This has subsections that include overt influence and second-hand or accidental alterations, like leaving technology beyond their understanding in the hands of a less advanced culture, or signs of Starfleet's passing. Other powers, like the Klingon Empire and the Romulan Star Empire, do not have their own version of the Prime Directive, and definitely exploit that, and in the case of the Romulans in particular, their entire empire is built off of interference. It was always suspected that the Romulans were aggressive in their occupation of the Beta Quadrant beyond the neutral zone. However, it was not really until the fall of Romulus that the full extent of the Star Empire's brutality was revealed. The deep Beta Quadrant has always remained unexplored to Starfleet, beyond the occasional missions that the Klingons allowed to pass through their territory in the 24th century. Romulans, however, downright prevented Federation ships into their space, so the only looks the Federation ever really had in there were the rare chaperoned diplomatic endeavours, long-range observation posts, or classified missions. But with the destruction of Romulus and Picard effectively dissolving the neutral zone in his rescue efforts, this previously closed-off area of space is opening up to the Federation to explore. What has been found confirms many previously speculative assumptions about the formation of the Star Empire. After their long diaspora, the exodus from Vulcan settled on the Romulus system and began growing their strength. This area of the Beta Quadrant was already inhabited, but most of these civilizations were pre-warp or only starting out on their journeys, such as the Harkonnen. By casting off the growing Vulcan ideals that had been consuming their former homeworld, the Romulans simply exercised their advantages to conquer and suppress other inhabited planets, forcing many to become vassal states of the Empire and supplying their resources to Romulus to help foster its reach. It was in this way that the Star Empire grew to cover a large area of space, and they simply pointed out areas that could not contest their claim and said, "This is ours now." In order to maintain their influence, they kept a heel pressed down on their conquests, through firepower and subterfuge. Additionally, they had no qualms about employing things like biological weapons, as they did to the aforementioned Harkonnens, basically erasing that species entirely with an artificial genetic plague. Their unrestrained ambition fostered their empire into a near unrivaled power, and they continued to maintain that by employing agents among other entities in order to maintain their superiority. The Star Empire had a monopoly over space travel in its territory too, meaning that many of their subjects were kept isolated from one another, and Romulan technology was kept away from them. Many of these formerly suppressed species were uncovered during the evacuation attempts, with every other Romulan colony world, such as Uyat Beta, being home to a native species that the conquering Romulans had forced into service, in this case as an agricultural workforce. So, I suppose in this fashion part of a Prime Directive can be seen, but this was motivated from fear and the desire to remain ahead of those they bullied. The Klingon Empire's history is a little different, but also one marred by interference and interfering with other powers. To begin with, back in their pre-warp times, the Klingon Empire was unaware of alien life until the invasion of the Hur'q, although some speculate that their legendary gods were also aliens. The Hur'q species is never seen on screen, but their legends were proved true in Deep Space Nine, and they were featured prominently in Star Trek Online. This insectoid species originated from the Gamma Quadrant and eventually found their way to Kronos. Yes, that is a distance to travel, and I'm not getting into it here, it is explained. These aliens, simply referred to by the Klingon term for outsider, Hur'q, were warred upon by Kalis during his heyday, and may have been one of the last wars he fought, although other accounts claim he was already dead by this time. I'm getting sidetracked. It was around this time that the Klingon people, after fending off the Hur'q, began to expand beyond their solar system with warp drive, again with some accounts stating that they had simply stolen and reverse-engineered warp from the Hur'q. Either way, the savaging of Kronos had left the Klingon homeworld resources deficient, and the Klingons turned outward to find new grounds. So, their first interstellar encounter being war, their planet in need of resources, and many of these new warp vessels being crewed by militant houses. What do you think happened? Yeah, these Klingons also found other neighbouring species and simply settled on those worlds with something they required. They effectively strong-armed any existing native populace into serving them, taxing them with goods and resources, and like the Romulan Star Empire, this saw the Klingon houses grow rich off exploitation. It seems, however, that the Klingon Empire placed less restriction and control on its conquests, throwing its weight around for sure, but many houses lacked the cohesion of the Star Empire, and by the 22nd century, it was the case that if a planet became too much trouble for them, they would often just leave it alone or, well, raze it to the ground. So, in this way, their empire grew, but it was also one never lacking in conflict, which suited the Klingons just fine as their culture shifted ever more towards one of warfare, eschewing their prior trades in favour of seeking more conquest resources, glory and battle. They had no non-interference policies at all, and that stems from a fundamental difference not seen in either the Romulans or the Federation. The Klingon philosophy is closer to a more honest might makes right than the Romulan one, which can be best described as our might makes us right. If one of the Klingon subject worlds rose up against them, they best be ready to fight and spill blood for it, because the Klingons would accept that challenge wholeheartedly in an attempt to crush any rebellion. However, if a rebellion succeeded, then the Empire was more likely to enter into an alliance or some neutrality or trade partnership with them. This is what happened with the Orion Syndicate, which even had a strong presence on Kronos after the two powers butted heads and settled on working together. Incidentally, the Orions are another species whose entire culture was practically the result of interference in their history. In this case, the mass slavery of the Orions. In this case, the Syndicate formed in the image of their former masters, becoming a criminal empire across numerous worlds. Finally, there are two more species that were messed with: the Vulcans and the humans. In fact, the Vulcans are speculated to have their entire existence owed to the Arretans, who settled numerous other colonies in their heyday, uncaring of if those worlds were already inhabited, birthing the Vulcan civilization. Likewise, the Greek gods of Earth mythology were proved to have been real, and simply visiting aliens in the 23rd century when the remnants of these gods were discovered by Kirk on Pollux 4. Their culture, styles and commandments had become the bedrock for the ancient Grecian society, shaping a large period of Earth's own history and mistaking technology for magic, enshrining themselves in myth. There are a number of other entities in canon and apocrypha that could be chalked up to alien interference across the board, not to mention time travel incidents. One thing I did like the Kelvin films for was the opening of the second film, which had the Enterprise sighted by a primitive native populace in a flagrant disregard for the General Order 1 by a cocky Kirk. This had these tribes throw away their holy scroll that they had been prepared to kill to protect, and began to worship the Enterprise as a saviour. All of this goes to show that even the smallest impact changes a culture completely. Sometimes the Federation did involve itself with another culture, pre-warp or no, if too much harm had already been done and it was deemed better to simply come clean. We see examples of honesty from Starfleet, from Kirk in Nural in A Private Little War, where he had visited before and been exposed, choosing to be honest and work with the natives, and from Pike in Strange New Worlds, when he just lays out everything to the governments of Kylie 279 after their subterfuge only exacerbates things. The Prime Directive overall exists because of the numerous examples Starfleet has witnessed from others without such a mandate. When the mighty do as they please without constraint, it often leads to those others being exploited in their efforts to attain more might. So the Federation took on the Vulcans' principle of non-interference as a caution, placing it foremost among their rules. This way, any violation must be weighed and balanced accordingly, and any intervention made on the part of a starship captain, accidental or not, is one that is then judged on in a case-by-case basis, and never lightly. Otherwise, entire civilizations' courses are altered from uncovering their own development and fate. Thanks for watching this video on the Prime Directive. I've been Rick, and I'll see you next time from my hidden observation post. Wait, what? Never mind, you didn't hear that. Goodbye.